Good morning, young parents. Wow, very good. Just the reception that I expected from young parents. You're tired, I know. It's good morning. Good morning. Yes, good morning. I know it's very, very early. Thank you for making the effort to come early this morning. We had to shift the usual service timing earlier because we needed to accommodate two services. You may be thinking, this space is so empty, right? I'm sure it can accommodate more people. Why is it that we have to split into two services? It's really because our kids' spaces and our parents' lounge is not big enough to accommodate both sets of kids, the whole church kids. So last year it was exceptionally crowded and chaotic. Those of you who were here last year, you will know that instead of bringing heaven on earth, we brought hell on earth. So this year, right, we really had to change the time slot to craft out two new services. So thank you for making it for the 9 a.m. service. Please help me to thank the volunteers for coming early today. You know, the worship team, the live production team especially, right? Some of our volunteers woke up at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. just to be here to set up at 6:30 a.m., all right? So please give them a big hand. And these are not very young adults or Calebs that are empty nesters. These are also young families that they have young children of their own and they woke up early just to serve you today. And they're also not just serving for this service, but they're going to serve all the way until 1:30 p.m. until the second service, okay? So please give them another big hand. They really deserve it. In the next 2 weeks, we will be speaking about the topic of parenting, all right? And admittedly, right, philosophies of parenting have changed quite a bit over the years. When we were young, we kind of whacked and we kind of scolded like nobody's business. How many of you, by show of hands, you were punished physically as a child? You were caned, you were whacked. Cane? Anybody got caned before quite regularly? Okay, good, show of hands. Anybody got hit by belt? By your father's belt? Okay, over there, by the belt. I hope it's by the leather side and not the buckle side, you know. And that was normal. That was normal, you know. And then, right, when we grow up now, when we are parents now, right, now we kind of like cannot hit our kids, you know. We must be gentle, we must kind of like tune into their emotions. Why are you having big feelings? So we very sway because we are the sandwich generation that have to deal with the unregulated big emotions of our parents. And then now we have to deal with the unregulated big emotions of our kids. And we are stuck in the middle, right? So nowadays, it's about positive parenting, this new approach, right? And I came across this video that I want to share with you on positive parenting.
Kinder, gentler way to parent now. If you tell a kid no, and he asks why, you're not supposed to say, because I said so, that's why. That's bad parenting. Oh, they've switched it now. Yeah, there's a kinder, gentle way. You're supposed to give them a reason, you know? So my go-to reason was because it was dangerous, you know? It's dangerous. And I remember as they were getting a little bit older, my one boy wanted some cookies. I'm like, you can have 2 cookies. He's like, I'm taking 4. I just said you can have 2. He's like, well, I want 4. I'm taking 4. I'm like, you're taking 2. Why can't I take 4? Because it's dangerous. He's like, how's that dangerous, Dad? Because if you take 4, I'm going to freaking hit you.
So maybe that's the way, right? We solve it in between, right? It's dangerous. I think that's the thing that you learned from today. Dangerous, okay. So if you believe in positive parenting, like, hey, guys, I believe in positive parenting. Don't be offended. It's just a joke. It's just for laughs. On the next 2 weeks, we're going to do a young family series where today we're going to hear a message on stewards for a season. And next week, Pastor Leanne will be here to share with us. As for me and my household, sounds very familiar. It's this famous verse from Joshua 24:15 that a lot of you may have in your house and may have in your, like decorated all over your house. Today, the title of today's message is Stewards for a Season. You can take this down from Deuteronomy Chapter 6, verse 4 to verse 9. You can take down the title and the reference verse. I'm not really used to preaching at Northeast Center, so I don't really know where to stand. I feel like wherever I stand, I will block somebody, you know. But okay, we're just gonna go, all right. You know, when our children are younger, they are completely dependent on us, right? Obviously, right? They can't change diaper on their own. They can't feed themselves. Everything that they do, from feeding to changing to sleeping, it completely relies on us. And as they grow older, toddlers, preschoolers, they still need daddy, mommy, for almost anything. And then When they get to primary school, they start to develop a little bit more of their independence. And finally, when they reach their teens in secondary school, we get to experience full-fledged separation where they are more or less fully independent. In terms of the time that we spend, the contrast is huge. Imagine that the amount of time spent with you as children, right? Newborns spend about their time, about 100% of their time with you. Everything, you're always there with them. 100% of their time, whether it's sleeping or awake, is spent with you. Now, anybody want to guess, during the preschool and primary school age, how much time do your kids spend with you, on average? I know it's different from different families because of grandparents' help, childcare, and helpers, etc. Anyone want to guess what's the percentage of people time that children spend with you during the preschool and toddler years? Anybody? 50%. Emma? 67. Very precise. You want to go 66.667? Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dean. Anyone else? Come on, shout it out. There's a prize for the winner. 8%. 30%. All right. Okay, there's a prize for the winner, but I don't want to give the guy a prize. So he's right though. Usually for toddler and preschool, right? Preschool and primary school, right? About 60 to 70%. Okay, so Dean is right. He got it in the middle. And then the teens. Anyone want to make a guess for the? Clara, no! Now my second service, Clara, we try again. Okay. So the teens, you spend about 20 to 30%. Thank you. Okay, don't do the next one, okay? Then how about uni and young adults? Anyone want to make a guess? Uni and young adults? 10 to 20%. 10 to 20%. And finally, when they get married, when they move out on their own, they spend less than 10% of time with you. If you put it on a chart, it looks something like this. All right? So imagine, as newborns, they spend 100% of their time with you. As toddlers, as Dean said, 66.7% time with you. And then after that, it gets less and less and less, right? Just look at that for a while. The time that they spend with you dramatically decreases after 12 years old. If your math is mathing right now, right, I want you to consider this, okay? This area here, okay? 100%, and then this area here, 60 to 70%, between this age, the total amount of time spent with you, right? How much do you think it compares to the rest of their lives? How much do you think it compares to? If your math is mathing, who's fast with math? How much do you think it compares to the rest of their life? Do you think it's 1/4 of their lives that is spent from 0 to 12? 1/4? Less than that. Less than 1/4? No, I mean this area here. Is it 1/4? Is it 40% of their entire lives spent with you? I don't know if you know this, but this area here, right, compared to not their teens, not just teens until young adult, for the rest of their life, right, this area here is 2/3. 2/3 of the time that you spend with your children will have been done after they reach the age of 12, when they step into their teens. It's unbelievable, isn't it? That we spend so much time with our children now, right? They were like, I need a break. I need to get out of this. Yet we realize that when the bugger turns 12, turns 13 and enters secondary school, right? 2/3 of the time that we got to spend with him has already expired. Now, if you really think about this, it's not just in terms of the time, but it's also in terms of the influence. This graph does correlate with the influence that we have, because when they're younger, everything that they say depends on us. How much screen time can I have? Can I have 10 minutes more of show, Daddy? Can I have 10 minutes more? And then you say, okay lah, I give you 10 minutes more. Yeah, get 10 minutes and 10 minutes. They celebrate, I love you, I love you, I love you. But you say no, they say, oh, cannot. Because your word is the final decision, right? Whatever they bargain, no matter what they say, whether they throw a tantrum, whether they try to negotiate, whatever they do, whether they try to act cute, whatever they do, the final say is always yours. And then gradually, your influence over their lives gets less and less and less and less. Soon, they will not just have the ability to argue back, but soon they will have the ability to outright disobey you and do their own thing. They will have the ability to circumvent the rules that you create for them because they will get smarter than you. I heard of this pair of brothers who, the parents, one of the pastors in our church, the parents locked the PlayStation or the video game, I don't know where's PlayStation or whatever the video game, inside the cabinet. They went to YouTube, figured out how to pick the lock. Pick the lock, play the video game, then when the parents are coming home, put the thing back and lock it back. That's how like innovative they are, right? To figure out how to circumvent the rules. Very soon, right? They will know technology better than you. You have to learn, hey, boy, teach me how to use this thing. Like what our parents do for us. And I want you to grasp this idea as we start today's message, that you have a limited window to influence their lives. You have a limited window to give them the best possible foundation for their lives. You may have heard this saying, the days are long, but the years are short. Right? The days are long, meaning it's exhausting, it is tiring, we lack sleep, we are tired from a long day of work, but when we go home, it's not a safe space where we can unwind and relax. Instead, we have to switch on, we have to break up fights, we have to make sure that they eat their dinner and shower, and at the end of the day, when they finally finish the homework and go to sleep, it's just like, actually, what did I accomplish? Nothing. It's just like daily routine. We never really move anything forward. We just have to keep doing over and over again, always on alert mode, with no safe space, constantly wanting a break, constantly wanting to get away, and yet realizing that as young as parenting may be, as difficult and as long as the days may be, that in the blink of an eye, the years just pass like that. It was just yesterday that I had my first boy, Isaac, and he was like this. And then 8 years later, he's buying us dinner at McDonald's. He used his own money, saved his own money, and then through one of the Axis finance workshops, right, he saved up his own money and he bought us dinner at McDonald's. And how did that just happen? From 8 years ago, this little baby who can't even talk, can't even do anything, just keeps sleeping, can't even open his eyes, to this boy that goes, where did those 8 years just go by? And if you look at your own kids, you think about your own kids and how they grew, it's like it flies by so quickly. Soon, that little kiddo will be a young adult. And he will reason with you and argue with you. And you have conversations with him, dialogues with him as an adult peer to peer. And right now, young parents, I want to impress upon you that you only have a very, very short window, a limited window to impact and influence their lives. And so today, as you listen to the Word of God, I want you to be listening to it just as God commanded the Israelites through Moses some thousands of years ago, as we look at the instruction given to Israel. Deuteronomy Chapter 6. Starting from verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shall we read this together? 1, 2, go. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Now, this passage of scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 6 is a foundational passage in the Old Testament. It's referred to as the Shema, S-H-E-M-A. What it refers to, this word Shema means hear. Hear, O Israel. It's part of Moses' instruction to Israel to hear these commands of the Lord before they enter the promised land. I want you to know who this instruction is for. This is Moses addressing a new generation of Israelites. This new generation of Israelites were not the generation that was brought out of Egypt, out of slavery. That generation mostly died in the wilderness during that 40 years of wandering. So this new generation of Israelites, after 40 years, was about to enter the promised land. This new generation, remember, while they did witness God providing for them in the wilderness, they did not witness God bring them out of slavery, out of Egypt. This new generation needed to be reminded of their identity as God's people and the responsibilities that they had under this covenant that they had. So this was Moses' instruction to them. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It begins with a declaration stating the lordship of God, stating the lordship of Yahweh, saying that there is no God like our God, there's no God like Yahweh. The Lord our God, the Lord is one, He is the only one we will worship. Then the command, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. This commandment is for Israel to express its wholehearted love to Yahweh through obedience to God's command. So in the same way as when we read the New Testament in John chapter 15, right, which is the passage that we're doing this year as a theme, Jesus said, abide in me and I will abide in you. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my the Father's commands and remain in His love. So the idea is that it's not just love expressed by I love you, sarang heo, but it's love expressed through an obedience to commands. So Israel's love for Yahweh, Israel's loyalty to Yahweh was meant to be expressed through a wholehearted devotion to obeying the commands. Then comes the next part that emphasizes the importance of teaching God's command to the next generation. In verse 7, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Basically, conversations at home and along the road and at bedtime and at morning. Talk about the Lord. Talk about God. Talk about the commandments. And then tie them as symbols. Verse 8, tie them as symbols and bind them on your foreheads and write them in door frames and of your house and on your gates. Reminders or things that they will bring around, things that they will wear, and also places that they will frequently walk past, to remind themselves of God's command. The idea is to integrate the teaching of God's commands into their daily lives, into their everyday lives. The idea is not you only obey God on Sundays, or you only obey God on the Sabbath, or you only obey God in the place of worship at the temple. But the idea is to integrate the followership of God and the obedience to His commands to every single part of your everyday life. This is a foundational passage to Israel. Then as you read on, as they entered Canaan, God helped Israel cross the Jordan River on dry ground. In the book of Joshua, God made the walls of Jericho collapse as they marched around the city. God made the sun stand still during the battle of Gibeon. This generation then got to experience and encounter for themselves the miracles of God, the power of Yahweh, and eventually they stepped into the promised land that God had prepared for them. It sounds like a very happy story. It sounds like a happily ever after, right? Then we get to the book of Judges. Pastor Samuel Pan touched on this at Hope Conference this year. After that whole generation, the Joshua generation, had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord, nor what He had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. How on earth did that happen? Have you ever wondered? After God brought them across the Jordan River on dry ground, after God made the walls of Jericho collapse after they walked around it 7 times, after God made the sun stand still so that they can continue to win the battle, after this generation experienced so many victories, and yet, once this generation passed, the next generation neither knew the Lord nor what He had done for them. Some people speculate because they didn't teach and disciple well enough. Maybe they were complacent. Maybe they didn't eradicate the other religions, the other false gods or pagan influences around them. But whatever the reasons are, the sad truth is this, that another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what He had done for Israel. One generation, after they experienced the incredible miracles of God, this happened, one generation later. And today, the sobering truth I'd like to ask all of us, I believe God is asking us today is this: will the same be said of our children's generation? Because I know that you experience God. In fact, today, as we gather, many of you, it's been a long time since I've seen you, because we're in different centers now. And it's really good to see you. Over the many years, we're in this church together, we're serving, we're loving God together. We have experienced community and life groups. We have experienced God's miracles in our life. But what will happen to our children? Maybe we have pledged our commitment to the Lord. But what if our children become a generation that grow up knowing neither the Lord nor what He has done for us? I'm not saying that we can determine how our kids will turn out. Because I'm not saying that every backslided child is a result or a fault of their parent. It's not true. Eventually, our children will grow up, they will have to make their own choices. Whether they want to follow God or not, we cannot decide on their behalf. But if they eventually choose not to follow God, will the main reason be because of our neglect as parents? Because in this crucial season of their lives, where we have the most time with them, 2/3 of time of their entire lives with them, where we have the most influence over their lives, where everything that we say comes to pass because we are the parent in the household, yet our focus is on our career. Our minds are on project after project that we need to nail at our workplace. Maybe our focus is on, we need to save up enough money for the next generation. So I will make sure that I have this endowment plan in place. Maybe I'll make sure that I will save up at least for my own retirement so that I don't become a burden to them. And then they can this is how we think that we are doing them a favor. We're helping them. Because we love them, we want them to have a secure future. We think about how can we help them. Nowadays, it's very competitive. Let's send them for berries. Let's send them for phonics. Let's send them for Weng Lao Shi. Let's send them for robotics. Let's send them for coding. Let's get them up to speed, because the best time for them to learn all these things is now. And that becomes our focus. We worry about their health. We worry about their nutrition. We want them to have an all-rounded education, so we send them for piano classes and violin classes and sports classes and art classes and all these things, right? Because we want the best for them. And then when we finally want to spend time with them, we go for great holidays. Let's go to Legoland. No, let's take it further. Let's go to Disneyland. No, not the one in Hong Kong. Let's go to Orlando. Let's make it wow for them, because this time that we have with our kids, we'll never get it back again. So we do all these things because we want the best for our children. And do we actually focus on their spiritual development, or have we completely neglected it? And I think that's the question that I believe God is asking us today. And if I am jolting your spirit, I want you to know that this is probably the Holy Spirit, and this is probably a long overdue message in your life. That even though, and I'm not saying that you're slacking, I'm not saying that you're living a very laid-back life, everything that you do is for your children. You sacrifice your sleep. You work really hard at work. You make sure that you suffer difficult bosses and difficult colleagues, but you stay in your job because you know that you need to provide for your family. You do all these things for your children. You send them to classes because you want the best for them. You do all these things. But is it in a kind of like a misguided sense of priorities that we prioritize all the things of this world, and yet we completely neglect their spiritual development? And the only thing that we do for them, for their spiritual development, is we bring them to Hope Kids on Sunday. We bring them to Hope Kids. We hope that Hope Kids teacher will settle it for 1.5 hours every Sunday, and that's it. Maybe force them to say grace before every meal. And if that's the bare minimum, right? And they grow up to be a generation that grows up knowing neither the Lord nor what He has done for us, right? It is directly traced to our neglect. And do we have the same attitude for Hope Kids as we have towards Chinese, for example? The kids learn Chinese in school sometimes every day, multiple lessons, periods a day, right? But yet we still send them to Weng Lao Shi, right? Still send them to enrichment class, this class, that class, this class, that class, because we think, you're not enough, need enrichment, right? How about their spiritual development? 1.5 hours on a Sunday, enough, man. And then someone got games, got praise and worship. What did they, do you actually impart to them? And I want us to understand this, that if you don't do anything about spiritual development, hear this, parents, if you miss everything, hear this. It will be no different from growing up in a non-Christian household. If you don't do anything to teach them about God, you don't prioritize the things of God, but you prioritize all the things of this world. What makes us different from pre-believers? They do that too. They do that better than us. And we're like catching up to them. But what sets us apart? It's a direct result of our neglect to invest in their spiritual lives. Sometimes when it comes to being on time for school, you cannot be on time for you cannot book, cannot be on, you be late rather. You cannot be late for school. You cannot be late for enrichment class because waste my money, $40 per hour, $60 an hour. You cannot be late for this, you cannot be late for this. But then church, late, never mind, you're very tired, must get all the kids out, very hard, very difficult. We make all these excuses. When it comes to making sure our family attends in-person services, live groups, being part of a community, but never mind, we'll just do online this week. We'll just take it. We just switch on online. Then even online, sometimes we're not really being able to pay attention. Sometimes we don't even bother to just join it online. Never mind. And when we take the things of the world seriously, and we take the things of God lightly, don't be surprised if our children take that same attitude. I want us to understand that the time and the influence that we have in our kids' life in this season is limited. And by the time they hit their teens, it will be a completely different situation, and we will not get this time back. So I'm asking you today, parents, how important is giving our children a strong spiritual foundation? How important is it to you? Of course you will say, it's important, Pastor, it's important. I know, it's important. How important is it compared to having a great holiday? How much time do you spend planning for your child's spiritual development versus planning for that year-end holiday? How important is it compared to your kid scoring A's, getting into a good primary school, getting into a good secondary school, getting into a good JC, getting into a good university? How important are these things to you compared to your child being kind, your child being selfless, your child putting God first at the expense of himself? How important is it for you to secure their future financially as compared to allowing them to struggle a little bit on their own, not have everything provided for, and yet learn to be contented with the things that God has given to them? And I want to ask you this. The way you live your life, do our priorities reflect that giving our children a strong spiritual foundation is important? Because the truth is this: you cannot outsource the discipleship of your children. We cannot. We cannot just pay the whole kids teacher, and then I think my kid are really not spiritual. Pastor, can I pay you for private tuition? $50 a week, $60 a week. Can you take him for 1 hour and you teach him Bible? Can or not? Can you teach him how to pray? You cannot outsource the discipleship of your children. Just like in parenting, there's certain things you can't outsource. You can't outsource breastfeeding, right? You can't. You can't outsource going for a family holiday. You can't hey, hello, can I hire you to go on a family holiday for me? No, you need to be there. And just like this is a spiritual responsibility that you cannot outsource, and you must take ownership. If you don't take ownership of your own child's spiritual growth in this crucial season, when they enter their teens, you might completely miss the boat. And then you regret. And if you find that today my message is a bit harsh or even possibly guilt-inducing, I want you to at least experience this guilt today before it's too late, rather than later when it's a lot harder to do something about it. I'm not saying that later on God's grace cannot redeem, but I'm saying if it's a direct result of our neglect and our intentional neglect, then today, parents, we better wake up. How are we going to spend our time for this season that we will not get back? Today I want to share you 3 things about the how. I think we can start to put into practice. Number 1 is to role model a life that follows God. If you want your kids to take God seriously, you must start to take God seriously yourself. In Deuteronomy it says, before you impress it upon your children, verse 7, before you teach them, you tie these things around their bodies, you put it on the door frames and all that. Remember, love the Lord your God in verse 5. Love you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. This is the hardest thing to do. Admittedly, even as a pastor, most of us, we are utterly embarrassed by our own walk with God, especially in front of our kids, because at home we cannot hide, right? They see how little we read our Bible. They see how little we pray. They see how long we scroll on our phone endlessly. They see how much time we spend on junk. They see how often we lose our temper. They see how they see the real us, the unfiltered us. And we know we can be better. We know we can role model better, but this is something that we can't hide. I want to share this with you to encourage you. If you feel that you are a lousy role model and you are not doing well and you are not a good spiritual role model for your kids, don't bother trying to show them. Let me remove the stand so they can see. Don't bother trying to show them a model of perfection. You will never succeed. Instead, role model for them earnest followership of God. Show them what it looks like to say yes to God when it's uncomfortable. Show them what it looks like to admit our mistakes humbly. Show them what it looks like to seek forgiveness. And when we do this as parents, you never know the impact that you are making. The impact that you are making on your children by your life example will mark them. You cannot outsource this, parents. Whether you choose to embrace it or whether you choose to neglect it, you will reap the results one day. And if this is something that you know you need to work on, but it's hard, but there are things that you know that you just struggle with patience, you just struggle with comparison and envy, you just struggle with inadequacy and all these things, right? The Equip department of our church has produced this material called the Inner Life of a Parent. And this material is a great place to get started. It is specially designed as a life group material so that young family life groups can go through each lesson that is relevant to young parents. Topics like inadequacy, like patience, like battling envy, like the importance of community. Each lesson will study some scriptures from the Word of God. Then after that, some reflection questions and some topics for discussion in life group. You know what the Equip team even did? They even prepared a PowerPoint slide for every lesson so that you as young fam life group leaders and young fam life groups can just take the PowerPoint, plug and play in your life group and go through it. I want to encourage you. Some of you, your life groups have already gone through this material. Those of you who have not, I want to encourage you to go through this material. At the end of the day, your parents will not remember, your kids will not remember, oh, daddy and mommy, they were perfect. They did everything right. They're so perfect that I don't even believe in Jesus. I think my parents are Jesus. No, they will not think that way about you. They will know that you're not perfect, but one thing that you can resolve is that I want my kids to remember that daddy and mommy took God seriously. And I think if you can leave them with that model, that is enough for them for the rest of their lives in terms of their own journey and walk with God. Number 2, teach them who God is. On one hand, you might feel inadequate to teach them because you're not a pastor, you're not a Bible scholar, you're not even a Hope Kids teacher, you're quite noob at your Bible, you don't have the 4 C's or the 3 P's or the whatever to teach your kids, right? But if you look at the scriptures, it doesn't talk about teaching them all sorts of complicated theology. It says impress them on your children, talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up, tie them in symbols, etc., etc., etc. The teaching of God, who He is and what He has done is to be taught in everyday life, not in a Bible class. You don't need a Bible PhD to be able to do this. And I want us to think about right now, just right now, I want you to think right now about the miracles that God has done in your own life right now. Think about the miracles that God has done in your own life. I want you right now to think about the times, significant milestones where you have encountered God. You yourself, as a parent, I want you to think about the decisions that you have made to obey God even when it was difficult, and how God delivered you and how God made them come to pass. And there's so many of these. If you walk with God for a number of years, now I want to ask you this question, parents. Do your kids know about any of them? Have you told your kids before? Have you ever shared any of these stories about how you encountered God before? If not, right, how will they grow up to be a generation that knows what the Lord has done if you never tell them what He has done in your life? Have you ever told them before? There's this story that I have, because when I was in university, and then I was giving to the church building fund, and then I had no money. And then so I had no money. I ate the last packet of Oreos, and I made the last packet of Milo in my hostel, and then I went to class that day, and then somehow in the corner of a classroom, this is the summarized version, I picked up $10 when I was a uni student, in uni year 1. And I tell this story to my kids, to just tell them of how God provides. And they love to hear this story, you know. Like sometimes when it comes to bedtime story, I want Papa to tell the story of when you have no money. Papa, tell me the story of when you have no money. So I keep telling them this story of when I had no money, and I keep repeating the same story over and over again of how I was wanting to save up money because I was a new believer. I wanted to save up money for the church building fund. At that time, it was called the Breakthrough Campaign, because I was so grateful for what God was doing in my life. At that time in my NTU hall, I exhausted all my money. I had no more money in my savings and everything. And then I keep telling them this story. I wish that your kids get to hear what God has done in your life, so that they will not grow up to be a generation that knows neither the Lord nor what He has done for you. You don't need to keep teaching them, you know, in all sorts of structured ways, but at least get started on that. And then, if you don't know how to get started with family discipleship, I want to encourage you, start learning. Start reading. Start finding out. Nowadays, there's ChatGPT. You can just ask, recommend me 5 books on family discipleship. Recommend me 3 great podcasts. I want to disciple my children in this way, that way. Learn through books. Learn through podcasts. Learn through articles. Learn through blogs. You know, there are a lot of things that we didn't know about parenting. When the baby was born, do you know how to swaddle the baby? Do you know how to wear a diaper? Do you know how to breastfeed? Do you know how to feed? When they went to primary school, do you know how to go to MOE website to apply? You have to find out, right? You have to find out how to use Class Dojo and Parent Gateway and everything. You have to find out when is school closed and when is school open and all that, right? It takes time. It takes effort. And most of all, it takes humility to realize that I'm a noob, I don't know anything, I need to learn, I need to grow. But you're willing to do all these things, right? Because no choice. But how about your spiritual development? Are you willing to grow? Are you willing to learn? Are you willing to read up? You may not be a pastor, you may not be a Hope Kids teacher, you may not be a very pro, this may not be your world, but are you willing to at least put yourself through the grind for the sake of the spiritual growth of your kids? Here are some books that I like to recommend. Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp. This book guides children's hearts. It doesn't just address outward behaviors, but it guides children's hearts. And it gives practical advice on how to lead children spiritually, how to help parents be intentional about shaping the children's understanding of God. Then we get to Family Discipleship, a book that was given to me by a dear couple. And this Family Discipleship provides a framework for how to disciple children intentionally, using everyday moments to teach and grow their faith. And the final one, Big Truths for Young Hearts. It explains very key Christian doctrines in very, very simple ways that children can understand to help them build their theological foundation. And right now, we have some of these books that I want to give to you. All right? I have 5 of these books that we want to give to you. Who promised that you will read them and then will apply them in your life? Who? Okay, well, yeah, you just decide who you want to give to, okay? Whoever face you like, face you don't like. Those who look a bit old, I think a bit too late already. I'm just kidding, okay? You decide. Just don't just stay at that side, all right? You pray lah, huh? How about those of you you have your hands raised and you pray, I want that one, Lord. I want family discipleship, Lord. And then you see whether the Lord is good to you today. Anybody? For those of you who did not get a book, right? Can I give you this very, very good advice? Buy it. Buy it from Amazon, buy the ebook. You didn't get it free, doesn't mean you cannot learn and you cannot grow, right? Don't be so kiam kana, okay? Don't be so kiam siap. If something's important, it's worth investing in, buy it. Spend time there, alright? Those of you who got the books. Who got the books? Hands up. Who got the books? Alright, congratulations. I want you to promise, I want you to swear on your own life and your kids' life that you will read them, that you will put in the effort to apply them in your life. And then once your kids grow up and your last kid turns 13 years old and grows up, right? Throw the book away. Don't keep it on your shelf. In fact, give it away to someone else who needs it. But I want to encourage you, put in the effort. Put in the time, invest in your kids because they need it. The spiritual growth of your kids matter. I pray that in Hope Church, we raise a generation of kids that love God and know God even more than our generation. Wouldn't that be awesome? That our kids' generation, they outdo whatever our generation has done. But it can't happen by accident. It can't happen if we continually exercise neglect. Finally, the third thing, coach them, empower them to live out their faith. Coach them to live out their faith. I want you to know that one day, soon and very soon, in the blink of an eye, your children will decide whether they want to follow Jesus. It will be their decision, not yours. In fact, sometimes we are preparing our own kids. When one of my kids says, I don't want to go to church this week, sometimes we'll tell them that one day you'll get to decide whether or not you will go to church. You will get to decide. But right now, Papa and Mama will bring you, you have to follow us. But one day they will get to decide. In fact, sometimes we tell them intentionally, one day you will decide whether or not you want to follow Jesus, and that decision is yours. Because one day they won't be following you to church on Sundays. They will decide how they want to spend their Saturdays. Before you know it, they won't be listening to you about God, about church, about Christianity, about anything for that matter. Because they will listen to their peers. They will listen to whichever influencer that is online. And maybe when they're younger, we can be more instructional, like, okay, it's time to pray, everybody. Let's put away everything and let's pray. Let's do our family devotions now. You can't say that word, it's a bad word. You can't do this, you must do this. As they get older, we must adapt our parenting style. We can't just do the instructional way and then from 12 to 13 where we expect a flip of a switch suddenly, right? Where we become very empowering, very understanding. We need to gradually taper off the instructional and the directional style and more to begin to involve them in discussions, engage in discussions. And sometimes your children might ask you these questions that are a little bit irritating. Why? Why did God kill so many people when God is good? And you're like, don't ask so much lah. We're tired already, The end of the day, then we're trying to just get our Bible devotions done, and then you gotta ask this kind of question. Because God did it lah. God is always right lah. And sometimes we just sweep aside their questions of the faith, right? But I want to encourage us, especially if our kids are older, especially if in their upper primary, especially if they're already in their teens, to don't just shut down their questions, to don't just give blanket answers, 10-year series answers, but to listen actively. Maybe they have a question behind their question. Maybe when they ask, why does God kill so many people? Behind their questioning, can God really be good? Does God really love? Maybe they have a question behind the question that may not surface. They have a question about His fairness, His kindness, His sovereignty. And I want to encourage you as parents, as your kids age, to be willing to explore together. The kids soon will see you as you don't have all the answers anyway. So don't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, be willing to explore questions of the faith together with them, and even come to certain times where there's no conclusion, but yet, I feel like I really don't know, but this is the best that I think it is. What do you think? In a manner of mutual respect. As your kids get older, in primary school and upper primary, start to give them spiritual responsibilities. At home, prayer and devotions don't always have to be led by you. It can be led by them. They can choose the worship song to sing. They can choose to serve communion. They can be in charge of certain things. You don't have to be the one leading everything from a top-down manner. And most of all, as they get older, connect them to a spiritual community. Because soon and very soon, the parental influence will be less and less and less, and the peer influence will be more and more and more. Somebody shared with me before that, how can it be that when a kid goes to BGR, they, instead of consulting the parents, they consult their ablaze leader? This is not right. My answer to that person was that, you think if they don't talk to their ablaze leader, they will talk to you, man? They won't talk to you. You mean when you were in your teens and you had BGR issue, you talk to your parents, man? Think about it. I think we are living in a different world where it's like, oh, everything is very prim and proper and very like Christianized, right? But the reality is that when they enter into their teens, peer influence, influences from online, from the media, from social media, they will all take over. And so they need a community of fellow believers to continue to help them in their walk. The influence that we have as parents will get less and less. And if we recognize it, we must already begin to start empowering our kids to stand on their own faith. Very soon, parents, listen to me, very soon, it will no longer be your faith that they tag along for. It will be their own decision to follow the Lord. I want you to hear this song. It's called These Are the Days by Corey Asbury. And I think this song touched me a lot, and it reminds me, and I hope it will remind you today, of how fleeting this season that we are in, and how important it is to seize every single day and every moment. And then after that, I will come up and close in prayer.